I just wonder, in terms of having received 2 deputations with 2 different positions, I wonder whether it would be useful just to reflect a little briefly on the history of how we got to having this in the district plan, I mean, as has been stated, and in terms of the undertakings given and the expectation that has been created that they would be in the first phase of the DPR.
I can give you a brief historical outline, and perhaps Brigitte will be able to comment more specifically on some of the more latter discussions. I think as councillors who have been involved will know, the Mail site is one of, well, it's a site within a corridor which has been identified for some time following the PC1 review, to the urban development strategy and to the RPS for consideration for its long-term land use planning. I think, and speaking in sort of in the round, the existing established Rural 5 zone has been identified as being effectively a form of planning blight and not a sustainable zone going forward.
Rural 5.
Rural 5,
yep.
And that takes that large rustly corridor swathe. So when the UDS was being, when PC1 to the UDS was being considered, there was submissions concerning that, and the council was given a direction to look at that whole corridor and look at what the land use planning options were.
That's the corridor that way rather than the corridor down Memorial Avenue.
That's correct, yes. So the corridor running down Rusty Road. The Mail site and some of the land around the Mail site is further complicated by the fact that going at perpendicular to that, there's an air noise corridor which relates in an approach path corridor to the east-west runway to the airport. And now if I move to the particular, the Mail site has been a point of contention for some considerable years because there have been aspirations that various landowners have held around the development of that site versus what either the Rural 5 zone or the noise and height limitations for land under the approach path and activity limitations have historically been. So it is a complex site in that regard. The council has received pre the earthquakes a privately initiated plan change which went through a number of discussions, and that promoted, and I'm sure Mr. Christensen may have outlined that, but it has gone through a number of guises, but has looked largely at being a retail and business centre. When we began the district plan review, we looked at a number of private plan changes that were in train, and basically, as you would do in any normal circumstances, go to those plan change proponents and say, look, we're about to commence a review of the city plan. It would seem more efficient and more effective to all parties, including the community, to wrap those private plan changes into the district plan review. We had already, in discussions with Mail over a number of years, expressed our professional opposition to the extent of the development they were proposing. So when we went to them, and Brigitte might want to comment in detail, we said we will look at this area. We believe that there is some merit in moving it from a Rural 5 to a more active zoning that is reflective of its position on both Memorial Avenue, on the major State Highway 1 corridor going north-south and being under the flight path. And we will look at producing an appropriate zoning to go into the review. That zoning may not satisfy the Mail proponents, and they were aware that if it went into the review under the council's name, they would have to lodge submissions to that like any other party. But our intention was to actually actively address getting a long-term rezoning in place for that land. As you will also know from the discussions around the DPR, we've had a number of discussions with you regarding the other elements of the Northwest Review Area program, where we had previously identified 3 new business cells in there. Again, the same principles apply, and there have been various discussions about how much of that gets brought into the first phase or second phase review. So that's the process we've been under. The undertakings to the male proponents was not to deliver their rezoning. It was not to agree to what they had proposed. It was to carry forward into the review a reasonable long-term and considered business-type zoning that would meet the objectives of the corridor, would be responsible to the particular situation of the site and to the airport. So that's the approach that's been taken to date, and I'm happy if Brigitte wants to clarify any other matters.
If I could just add a few more comments. Just regarding consultation, as Mr Teelan has already said, this site has been under planning sort of spotlight for some time. It was first discussed with the community and citywide as part of PC1, which was a change to the Regional Policy Statement, Chapter 6, and then it was put to submissions and further submissions as
pre-earthquake.
That's correct, pre-earthquake. And then, as was already said, it also went into the LURP, the Land Use Recovery Plan, which was also put out for consultation. However, as that was a recovery plan, there were no submissions and further submissions process.
But all that was just a statement that the area was subject to this group. I mean, it was just a line on a map. A lot of people didn't
it was
notice.
Actually highlighted as a greenfield area to be for greenfield
yes,
business.
but it was just a statement on a map. It didn't. There wasn't a whole chapter that says we're going to have greenfields developed. Right.
No, that's correct. So that was under the Land Use Recovery Plan, and it was clear that the actual zoning for that greenfield business would be done through a district plan. And then there were a number of public meetings. I have brought to you through the public URCAL workshops process all the consultation that has been undertaken, but specifically in this area of the city, there are at least 2 public meetings which I myself attended. And at those public meetings, we discussed a number of elements and asked a number of questions, and we discussed the mail site in some detail at both of those meetings. Also, there was the draft chapters there for people to look at and the maps that highlighted exactly what could happen should that go through. It was also highlighted that the process was that this was pre-notification engagement, and all of those comments came back to you in the form of a large booklet that was given to you and showed to you. But also this specific issue was highlighted when Mark Stevenson talked to you about the primary issues that came through regarding the industrial chapter. So just adding a few more comments on how the owners of the site might consider why they were in first tranche. And I'm strung here between being told by the government that discussion of the OIC is meant to be confidential. However, in the early days of the development of that process, they were considering a moratorium on private plan changes, and so there was a need to go to all of the plan change proponents that had plan changes in the system or that were coming up, to go to them and ask, do they want to go through the district plan review or not? Otherwise, take chances it might have to be considered with later on. That has since changed. I understand there is to be no moratorium in the OIC. However, as we all know, that is not yet signed off by Parliament, so I can't say for sure.
That's news
what
to
will
me.
happen. That's all I can say at this moment. I mean, I'm only aware of what I've been told, but in previous versions of the OIC, we were asked deliberately to go to each of the private plan change proponents.
So, did we know that?
Well, so in what respect?
Well, were we advised that individual applicants were going to be approached about a provision in an order in council that we didn't know about?
That was very early on in the piece, right in the beginning of the year, I believe.
So no.
I don't think we would have advised you on that, but I would, irrespective of that, I probably would advise you that the normal process when a review is underway is to look at private plan changes in train or private plan changes that have been received, and to go to those proponents and try and wrap them into a review. That's common practice by most councils.
So we got the impression before, though, that this was something that that the council staff wanted?
Well, what wanted in terms of actually streamlining the process to avoid having different processes potentially operating under different pieces of legislation, not wanted per se in terms of a particular outcome.
Right. So do we, I mean, we're a rock and a hard place. I've been working on the assumption that the private plan change can just be lodged and it can proceed if this one isn't sufficiently timely for the applicants.
It can be, is my understanding. They would probably have to withdraw their current plan change, possibly, because they, well, I'm delving into the OIC here and I'm not sure.
No, but maybe without delving into the OIC, let's talk. They haven't, have the applicants got a plan change lodged with you at the moment?
Yes.
They do.
And is that where they want to be ultimately, or does it now reflect a slightly negotiated outcome to go into the district plan? Or
No.
well, if there's a pre-existing one in place, then surely it doesn't take anything to just activate it, does it?
That's correct. I mean, the council could move to notify that plan change.
So it's still in the mix.
But again, it's in that state. So you end in that scenario, you would end up with a plan change, which is it's different to what staff have recommended inside the review. It would be proceeding.
Yeah.
We would have, I suppose, 2 exercises operating in parallel.
Yeah. Which is obviously our preference is not to have 2
That's right.
processes operating at once. But we understood that that this particular one, if they weren't satisfied with the change in the time, they still had the ability to put up their plan change, which, as you say, is a different model, a different outcome than the one that has been worked through in the district plan.
Is that right?
Madam Chair, the answer to that partly requires us to explain the context of the draft OIC, which has been shared with the council on a confidential basis. That might help your consideration of this if we were to be able to go into PX for 5 minutes, and I can explain what's in the draft of the OIC.
Well, I find it quite unsatisfactory to be doing this, and I just I'm just trying to think that without, because in a way it shouldn't be dependent on the order in council to get to the right position. It's just a little frustrating. What do I do? I guess that, you know, from our perspective, I mean, we didn't. Yeah, I know. I need a little help here. I mean, it's just not. I didn't know that there'd been any change in that respect. So.
Clarifying that, can I just be very clear? The applicant can put through a private plan change at any time, even though the district plan is up for review.
The law normally does allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is that still the case?
We can't
And
say.
that's the matter whether we need to.
So, I think we're going to have to go into PX, but I can't afford to hold up the meeting. So we're going to have to deal with it when we deal with public excluded later this afternoon. So I'm sorry, but it's just not possible to consider the recommendation that we have in front of us without having that detail. Yanni?
It might be really useful. This is like 2 items on our agenda that really rely on government. might be really useful to give the community and the developer some idea around the time frame for the IIC becoming signed and also public. I feel really concerned that we're going into PX to discuss things relevant to a process that the community are asking for certainty, clarity and transparency, and we don't seem to be able to give them any of that in the open, which really concerns me. So is there any, I mean, I haven't been involved with the IIC, but can anyone give a time frame, and can anyone enable the community to understand when these processes will be done? Because the other thing here that seems to be the issue is, what is the timing around stage 2? If we did stage, are we doing it in the next 2 months, 3 months? Is it going to be the next year? If it's only 2 months, we actually might save ourselves a bit of time.
Well, you've just asked a whole stack of questions that we're going to deal with in PX. So I'm just going to thank the two groups for having made the submissions. I do apologise to you, but we're trying to make good decisions here, and we have to make that on the best information that's available, and we can't put that information into the public arena. So I do apologise, but that's the way it is, and we'll have to move on to item number 5, which is the